Hello. The last few videos I've been meditating on whether we can consider the Gospels a reliable source for the things that Jesus said and did. And in yesterday's video, I noted that the scholarship shows clearly that the Gospels actually date to the time of Christ within living memory, and that the basic facts contained therein, that Jesus actually existed, that he's a historical figure. Scholars don't dispute that. It's independently corroborated by other sources. There was a miracle worker. His name was Jesus. And it's clear that the early Christians believed radical things about Christ. Even the pagan Romans were aware that they believed that they were eating the flesh and drinking the blood of their founders. So we've established quite a bit already, but there are a few other issues I think that we need to address. And the two that I want to focus on today are, number one, were the evangelists honest in the way that they portrayed Jesus? Do we have reason to suspect that they would have been tempted to embellish things or add things? And then the second issue that I want to confront is, although there were gospels that dated back to this time, could they have been modified? Could the more radical or theologically needed parts have been added in over time, perhaps say after the Council of Nicaea, where Christ's divinity was firmly established as doctrine? Is the version that we read today actually accurate to what the evangelists wrote? So let's talk about the first one first. Are the evangelists honest? Is this actually a recounting of what they saw of Jesus? I would argue that the strongest argument that it is accurate is that they were willing to die for it. There's no historical dispute that 3 of the 4 evangelists were in fact martyred for what they believed. And it's not like St. John got off easy with his exile at Patmos. So to my mind, at least, that's a very strong argument that whether they were right about Jesus or wrong about Jesus, this actually is what they believed of him, and they were willing to die for it. That's got to mean something. What did they have to gain by embellishing Jesus in a way that made them enemies not only of the pagans, the Gentiles, but even of the Jews? Notice that Saul, who became St. Paul after Christ appeared to him, he went out to persecute the Christians. They were heretics from the Jewish position. Why not make Jesus just a prophet, a miracle worker? Why insist on the things that the Gospels do, unless they genuinely believed that Jesus said these things, unless they genuinely believed in the resurrection, for instance? So I have every reason to believe that the evangelists are honest in what they portray. Now, do we have what the evangelists actually wrote? Well, there are a couple facts. First of all, we have fragments of the Gospels and references to the Gospels that can be dated to the early 100s. And we even have a nearly complete version of John's Gospel, which is the most radical, that dates to about 200 AD. And this is something important to think about, because I think the claim of some would be that after Nicaea established Christ's divinity, that some of the strongest claims to Christ's divinity would have been added in order to bolster what the church had decided. Well, the Council of Nicaea was in the 300s, as was the Council of Constantinople, which reaffirmed Nicaea. But here we have the gospel, which most clearly affirms the divinity of Christ, and we have a copy that dates to 200 AD, well over 100 years before Nicaea. So that tells me that this is something that was passed on faithfully. Another story that has always struck me is that when St. Augustine was tasked by the Pope of his time with retranslating the New Testament and the Old Testament, he actually expressed caution, and he told this story about a bishop who had substituted just a word in his reading of the prophecies of Jonah, only to have his flock rise up and practically cause a riot because they did not recognize what it is that they heard in that translation. This is how carefully the early church studied their scripture, and how closely they watched and affirmed and passed on what it is that they heard. They would rise up and riot when a single word was replaced. This is what St. Augustine reported. Well, that is my time for today. More tomorrow. God bless.